Hi everyone, and welcome to the RavenCast. My name is Adam Ericksen, and this is our first episode. Everybody give it up for the first episode. Isn't that exciting? Yes, we are like 10 seconds into the first episode, and I'm just so happy we've made it this far. So here we go. I want to introduce you to the RavenCast. In this episode. It is a product of the Raven Foundation. You can go check out the Raven Foundation website. And at Raven, there are 5 of us. And we try to make religion reasonable, violence unthinkable, and peace a possibility. And we do that using mimetic theory. And that's just a big academic phrase for saying that we learn how to be ourselves through imitation of others, through observing what others do and how they live, and that kind of, we absorb that, and that's how we begin to live. Mimetic theory claims that we are social creatures, and part of the way that we are social is that we are highly influenced by those around us. And there are, academic ways of explaining this, but I think the best way of explaining it is through biography. And I want to introduce mimetic theory to you by introducing myself to you. And I would say the biggest influence on my life were my parents, and specifically my mom. When I was in 5th grade, about 11 years old, my mom was struck with cancer. And at that age, I didn't really know what cancer was. I knew it was a big deal because nobody in my family was talking about it. we never talked about it, and I knew from that this could be problematic. As the years went on, I began to learn more about what cancer was and how dangerous it actually is. But I also learned a lot about life and death and faith through my mother, who modeled for me what life is about while she was dying from cancer. And when I was 11 years old, she had chemotherapy. And I can remember this moment where her hair was falling out. And she called out to me. And she said, "Adam, I want you to brush my hair." And so I took a brush. And at 11 years old, I was brushing my mom's hair. And these clumps of hair would come falling out of her head. And it was one of the holiest moments of my life, certainly of my young life. And again, I didn't really know what it was about, but it was my first lesson in loss. My mom was losing her hair, and at this moment, I didn't realize it at the time, but it was a lesson in losing my mother and how to deal with that kind of loss, and my mom inviting me into this loss with her. As she was learning how to lose her life, she was inviting me along on the road and modeling for me that you can hold this and it's okay, and that we're going to go through it together. And one of the really interesting things about my mother was that she wasn't a very religious person. In fact, she had the mouth of a sailor. She cussed all the time. And we went to church every Sunday primarily because it's what my dad wanted us to do. It was important to my dad, and so my mom went along. We drove separate cars. My dad would drive his car because he taught Sunday school in the morning, and my mom would take her car. And my mom and I would go together, and we would show up to church, and she and I would sit in the back of the sanctuary, and we would leave right after the sermon because that's what my mom wanted to do. And on our way home, we would stop at Taco Bell, and we would have our tacos, and then we would head home. And it was like this Sunday ritual of going to church and leaving early and going to Taco Bell. And it again was one of these moments that is surprisingly holy as you're growing up. Church at this building called church, and then church at Taco Bell. Again, it's just like these holy moments that begin to form you and shape you in relationship with those people who are around you. And there was this, I remember this point where it had sunk in that my mom could die from cancer. It was, her cancer went into remission and then it came back. And we were all excited about it going into remission. But when it came back, something inside of me thought, this very well could be it. Your mother could die from this. And I was scared. And I worked up the courage to ask my mother if she was ever afraid of cancer killing her. And she looked at me and she said, I'm not afraid because I know my Jesus will save me. And that sounds like a really pious thing to say. There's a part of me that just wanted to like shoo it off. But there's another part of me that thinks how profound a moment is that, because my mom was not religious. She was not even one of these spiritual but not religious people. Spirituality, religion wasn't very high up on her radar. But there was this moment where grace had entered into her life and into my life, where I discovered that it's not about saying the right things or believing the right things or doing the right things. It's about God coming to us in grace and love, and about us somehow receiving that. For my mom to say this came out of left field. I had no idea where it came from, but it was there as this kind of gift into her life that she was also sharing with me in my life. And again, saying, it's going to be okay. There's a bigger picture in all of this. And I'll tell you, cancer sucks. There's not a day that goes by that I wish my mom was here, that she could see her grandchildren. And there's a bit of it that feels like that was taken away. But for my mom, it was about living into something even bigger and trusting that the universe, despite what we may do to ourselves, to one another, that the universe is ultimately on our side. No matter what we've done or what we haven't done, that's where grace comes in. The Gospel of John says that in Christ we have received grace upon grace. It's this hyperbole of grace that we don't deserve, but is there for us in life and in death. Later on, I would come across that chapter, Romans chapter 8, where Paul says something like, nothing in this world can separate us from the love of God in Christ. Not even death, not life. It's always there. And that's what I learned from my mother. And I think that one of the ways that I want to relate this whole experience back to mimetic theory and why mimetic theory matters for us is that it really brings to a conscious level the models in our lives. We are always formed in relationship with others. Again, that's what makes us social creatures. But it's important for us to choose who our models will be. Because if we don't choose who our models will be, our models will choose us. And most of the models in our culture will tell us that the things important in life, the things that give you value, are success, how much money you have, how big your house is, how many cars you have. Those are the models that we have in our lives. But what my mom taught me was the things that really matter in our lives, the things that are important, are the things of love, of relationship, of being there for one another. All of these material things, how big your house is, how much money you have, all of those things to a certain extent matter, but they can get in the way of what really matters. And when my mom had to grapple with her own death, all of those things kind of washed aside, and she began to see what really matters. And that is the love of God that she received through grace, and passing that love onto others in her life. And so that is what mimetic theory has taught me, and why mimetic theory matters. My mom has been a model in my life about faith and what matters. And she ultimately, her model was Jesus, who also went to his death knowing what mattered in life. And that was to receive the love of God and to share that with everyone he met, including his enemies. And so when we can consciously choose to have that kind of model in our lives, we can help foster a more peaceful world. And that's what I want to explore with you in these RavenCasts. And so periodically, hopefully once a week, we'll be talking about mimetic theory and why it matters. And I'm going to be interviewing people that I think are doing good work with mimetic theory. And I hope that you will join me for that journey. So until then, grace and peace be with you.